Thank you very much. Before I start speaking, because I have a whole speech prepared for you, I want to say what an honor it is to be here. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever done, and I'm glad to share it with you. I have to make a little space here for my speech to read properly. So, today, I will address a subject that strikes at the very core of the Warhammer 40k universe, the ethical implications of the Imperium's war with chaos and the inverted meaning of order. This topic delves into the very core of what we traditionally perceive as order and chaos, might not be as clear-cut as we are led to believe. One of the first things to clarify in our discussion is that I will use the term Imperium to refer to the so-called forces of chaos. This choice is deliberate. Using chaos as a word can lead us into thinking we are dealing with nothing more than disorder and randomness. But this term, as used in 40k lore, is misleading. Chaos in the Warhammer universe is not mere entropy. It is a force of transformation, power, and as I will argue, sometimes a more cohesive structure than the Imperium itself. We must start by addressing the foundational question. Is the Imperium truly a bastion of order? And if so, how does this order manifest itself against its war against the Imperium? How does the Imperium, this force, what is labeled as chaos, contrast with the Imperium's own internal fractures? By the end of this talk, I hope to leave you questioning whether the line between chaos and order is as firm as we think. In the Warhammer 40k universe, the dichotomy between these two sides is straightforward at first glance. The Imperium represents order, law, structure, devotion to a singular cause. The Imperium is perceived as its antithesis, a swirling mass of unpredictable, malevolent powers. But as we delve deeper into the law, we see a paradox emerge. The Imperium, the supposed beacon of order, is often more chaotic than the Imperium itself. The forces of the Imperium, despite their name, often operate with greater internal consistency and purpose. In Dan Abnett's Eisenhorn trilogy, we see this contradiction play out starkly. Eisenhorn, an inquisitor of the Imperium, is tasked with rooting out corruption, but what he finds is corruption exists not only in the enemies of the Emperor, but within the very heart of the Imperium itself. In Malleus, for example, Eisenhorn grapples not only with the external threat of heresy, but also with bureaucratic infighting, moral decay, and ideological fragmentation within the Imperium. These are the so-called forces of order, yet they are beset by internal divisions that challenge the very essence of the Imperium structure. On the other hand, the forces of the Imperium are not simply anarchic mobs. Aaron Dembski-Bowden's The Talon of Horrors gives us a fascinating look into the inner workings of the traitor legions, specifically the Black Legion after the fall of the War Master Horus. Here, we see a group of warriors operating with a clear purpose, despite their allegiance to the ruinous past. Even though they serve deities like Thorin, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, the Legion maintains a kind of discipline and unity of purpose that is arguably more stable than many of the Imperium's institutions. The War Master's forces, despite being cast into the category of chaos, often exhibit more internal cohesion than the Imperial Guard or even the High Lords of Terror. This leads to an interesting philosophical question. If the Imperium claims to represent order, why is it that the most chaotic and fragmented elements often exist within its own ranks? Take, for example, the Horus Heresy, perhaps the most glaring example of the Imperium's internal contradictions. The War Master Horus, once the Emperor's favorite son, turns against the very order he had built. As detailed in Brad McNeil's Horus Rising, Horus' betrayal is not born out of a desire for chaos, but from his perception that the Imperium's order is inherently flawed, hypercritical, and oppressive. The heresy fractures the Imperium and sets the galaxy aflame, leading to a civil war that reveals just how fragile Imperial order truly is. The Imperium, in contrast, is often more transparent in its allegiances. Its worshippers, especially those aligned with a specific god, are bound by clear motivations. Whether they seek the bloodlust of Gorn, the endless knowledge of Tzeentch, the intoxicating pleasure of Slaanesh, or the calm endurance of Nurgle, their objectives are clear, their method unified by a shared devotion to their gods. The idea of chaos as random and disordered is, in fact, a misnomer. The forces of the Empyrean are driven by purpose just as much as the Imperium, if not more so. This is the ontological inversion at the heart of what is possible. The Imperium, while professing to be an embodiment of order, is riddled with chaos. Meanwhile, chaos, though perceived as anarchic, often exhibits a remarkable kind of coherence. Let's move now to the tactical dimensions of this conflict. How do the Imperium and the Empyrean forces wage war? Examining their methods for attacking and conquering worlds will give us some insight into their respective ideologies and ethical frameworks. The Imperium's approach to warfare is often haphazard and arbitrary. In Hell's Reach by Arendemski Bauern, we follow the defense of the hive city of Hell's Reach on Armageddon during an Orc invasion. The defenders, led by the Black Templars, are valiant, but the decision-making from the Imperial leadership is capricious at best. Whole sectors of the city are sacrificed based on vague strategic calculations, and millions of civilians are left to die as part of a greater plan. This reflects a pattern seen throughout Imperial history. Entire planetary populations are often abandoned, purged, or destroyed based on the whims of Imperial command. Planets might be bombarded for something as nebulous as suspicion of heresy or a perceived strategic advantage. In Execution Hour by Gordon Rennie, we see a similar example of an Imperial navy that acts without warning, destroying worlds simply because they have been deemed irredeemable. In contrast, Imperial forces tend to operate with far more foresight. In Storm of Iron by Graham McNeil, we see the Legion of the Iron Warriors as they besiege Hydra Caudatus. The Iron Warriors' assault is anything but chaotic. It is meticulously planned and executed with surgical precision. Before their invasion, the ruinous forces have already begun to infiltrate the planet. The population is subtly corrupted, its defenses compromised. The local dissidents are drawn into the service of the Empyrean. The attack itself is simply the culmination of years of preparation, where the seeds of rebellion and corruption have already taken root. This deliberate approach stands in stark contrast to the often reckless, brute force methods of the Imperium. Once a planet has been attacked, how do these forces consolidate their gains? In the case of the Imperium, the process is one of total domination and suppression. After a successful invasion, the Imperial forces imposed their will with brutal efficiency. The devastation of Bor Bagai with the aftermath of the Blood Angels' defense of their homeworld against the Tyranids. After the battles, the survivors must conform to Imperial law once again, regardless of the devastation they suffered. The Imperium's post-conquest regime is characterized by a rigid imposition of bureaucratic structures and laws. The native culture, tradition, and societal systems are often erased, replaced with imperial administration that seldom fits the local population's needs. The result is an unstable, fractured society filled with dissident cells and potential insurrections. The Imperium's presence is totalitarian, yet fragile. When the Imperium conquers a planet, the transformation is far more complete and irreversible. In the first heretic by Arendemski Bauern, we see how Lorga and his word-bearers approach the planetary conquest. Their method is not just to physically subdue the planet, but to spiritually convert its population. Once a world falls to chaos, it does so utterly and irrevocably. The old institutions, beliefs, and even the physical landscape itself are consumed and reshaped by the war. There are no lingering pockets of resistance, no remnants of previous societal order. The entire world is transformed into a reflection of the respective God that now holds sway over it. As described in Black Legion by Arendemski Bauern, this total conversion leaves no room for rebellion. Once a planet falls to the ruinous powers, it belongs entirely to the Empyrean body and soul. The contrast between these two approaches is stark. The Imperium, despite its claims to order, leaves behind chaos in its wake. Planets conquered by the Imperium often become hotbeds of insurrection, corruption, and civil unrest. Meanwhile, the Imperium, despite being labeled as chaotic, brings a kind of perverse order to the planet it conquers. There is no room for ideological conflict or rebellion because the population has been entirely subsumed by it. This brings us to a disturbing conclusion. In many ways, the forces of the Imperium bring more order to their conquest than the Imperium does. Where the Imperium leaves behind a fractured, unstable world, the ruinous powers leave a world united, albeit under a banner of madness. One of the central philosophical differences between the Imperium and the Imperium lies in their respective approaches to knowledge and belief. Both systems rely on a form of epistemic control, but they do so in markedly different ways. The Imperium, at its core, a theocratic regime where knowledge is heavily restricted and controlled. In Mechanicum by Graham McNeil, we see the length to which the Imperium goes to suppress innovation and free inquiry. The Adeptus Mechanicans, the guardians of imperial technology, treat knowledge as something sacred, to be preserved, not expanded. Technological advancement is heresy, progress is blasphemy. Instead, the Imperium relies on rote memorization and ancient rituals and superstitions. Even something as simple as maintaining a las gun is wrapped in layers of mysticism and doctrine. The result is a population that is deliberately kept in ignorance. In Gaunt's Ghost, we see how even high-ranking imperial officers are often unaware of the true nature of the universe around them. Knowledge is dangerous, and the Imperium dangerous because it leads to question, and question leads to heresy. The ecclesiarchy, with its vast apparatus of priests and missionaries, exists to enforce this ignorance. The Inquisition, as seen in Eisenhower and Grosvenor by Denebnet, ruthlessly suppresses any deviation from the official doctrine. The Imperium's grip on knowledge is ironclad, but fragile. Its power depends on the masses remaining ignorant and loyal to the Emperor, even as it crumbles from within. Contrast, the Imperium offers a path to enlightenment, albeit a dark and strange one. Its followers are often drawn into it by the promise of knowledge and power. In A Thousand Sons by Graham McNeil, we see the story of the Thousand Sons Legion who turn to the god Tzeentch in their pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The irony here is that while the Imperium condemns their quest as heresy, the Thousand Sons view it as enlightenment. They seek to understand the universe in ways the Imperium forbids, and they are punished for it. The Imperium offers its followers a kind of empowerment that the Imperium never could. Those who embrace it are not kept in ignorance, they are given knowledge, be it at a more substantial cost. As seen in the first heretic, Lorga's fall to the ruinous powers is driven by his desire to understand the divine truth of the universe, a truth the Emperor sought to keep hidden from him. It rewards curiosity and ambition with power, whether that's the psychic might of a sorcerer or the immortality of the demon prince. The Empyrean offers a form of enlightenment that the Imperium never can match. Building on the epistemic control of the Imperium, we can liken its approach to knowledge to Plato's allegory of the cave. Citizens are shackled within a narrow field of reality, only seeing the shadows of doctrine cast by the ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition. In this framework, any understanding beyond the strictures of imperial belief is akin to a revelation, dangerous and heretical. Those who, like Inquisitor Eisenhorn, seek deeper truth often find themselves alienated from the very institutions they will serve. His journey mirrors that of a prisoner escaping Plato's cave, only to find that knowledge brings peril, not freedom. However, the question arises, does the Imperium need to fully indoctrinate every citizen? The answer, curiously, may be no. Bulk of the Imperium's population lives in ignorance of its true scale, never encountering space marines or understanding the war. These citizens toiling in hive cities on agro worlds are cogs in a vast machine. For them, complete indoctrination is unnecessary, Only those in positions of power, such as planetary governors and imperial officers, require stringent ideological adherence to uphold the imperial creed. Yet, with the Imperium constantly at war, there is an unending need for fresh recruits of the Astra Militarum and other arms of the Imperium. This necessitates a degree of indoctrination across all levels of society. Ensuring a steady supply of soldiers who fight in the Emperor's name, even if they barely understand the cause for which they die. When we consider the ethical framework of the Imperium and the Imperium, we find that they diverge dramatically. The Imperium's morality is teleological. It is focused on the ends, not the means. As long as the Emperor's will is done, any action can be justified. Whether it's the extermination of a planet's population, the suppression of dissent, or the brutalization of entire civilizations, the Imperium's morality is defined by its goals, not its methods. In Horus Rising by the Navnet, the Lunar Wolves wage a campaign of extermination against those who refuse to bow to the Emperor's will. There is no room for negotiation, no mercy for the weak. The Imperium's ethics is one of absolute dominance. Anything that stands in the way of the Emperor's grand vision is to be eradicated, regardless of the moral. As we see in the First War, this extends even to the citizens of the Imperium itself. Loyalty is rewarded, but dissent is met with swift and brutal punishment. The Imperium, on the other hand, operates according to a form of virtue ethics, or arete. Each of the gods embodies specific virtues, and their followers act according to those principles. Thorn's followers value honor and martial prowess. Slanesh devotees seek beauty and sensation. Singe rewards ambition and cunning, while Nurgle's followers prize endurance and fortitude. While these virtues may seem alien or even grotesque to those within the Imperium, they provide a coherent ethical framework to its worshippers. In Soul Hunter by Aaron Danskebone, we see this virtue-based morality at play. The Night Lords, even in their depravity, act according to a clear set of virtues, values that emphasize strength, fear, and dominance. This brings us to the ultimate ethical inversion. The Imperium, which claims to stand for order and virtue, often acts in ways that are far more chaotic and morally ambiguous than the forces of chaos themselves. The Imperium, despite its denomination, operates with a clearer sense of purpose and consistency grounded in the virtues of the ruler's powers. So where does this leave us? The traditional view of the Imperium as a force of order and the Empyrean as a force of chaos is at best a propagandistic distortion. In reality, the Imperium is riddled with corruption, decay, and internal strife, chaotic at its very nature. The Empyrean, though branded as chaotic, operates with a strange kind of order, driven by clear virtues and consistent objectives. In light of these observations, we must reconsider the moral and ethical dimensions of the Warhammer 40k universe. The forces of the Imperium, despite their claims to order, are in many ways the agents of chaos, spreading instability and discord wherever they go. Meanwhile, the forces of the Imperium bring unity and coherence to their conquests. In conclusion, the Warhammer 40k universe forces us to rethink the concepts of order and chaos. The true nature of these forces is far more complex and ambiguous as we might think or assume. Perhaps it's the Imperium, not chaos, that embodies true disorder. Thank you.